So I think a lot of people get mistaken that going hard all the time or doing a bunch ride is always going to be good for you.
Right.
But it's not really the case. You
Okay.
get very one-dimensional.
So let's talk about why they're not good first, and then you can tell me why or when they can be useful. So why aren't they good?
But they're very fatiguing. Like
Okay.
they're good in isolation if you're doing them once, maybe twice a week. But if you're doing them all the time, they're very fatiguing on the body. Typically, bunch rides are on-off effort. So you're going really hard or you're trying to get back on the wheel. And yes, there's a constant pressure nature of it, but you're not steady state in the sense that you're not sticking to one power the whole time. So you get a very one-dimensional on-off athlete. And it's very fatiguing, that upper end energy system. So working fast twitch muscle fibers and your glycolytic energy system, it's very fatiguing. So if you're doing it all the time, it's very hard for your body to recover from that. And it may take more than 1 day to recover from it. If you're doing it 3 times a week, that's essentially every second day. You might need 2 days to recover from a really hard ride like that. So if you're doing it, adding that fatigue on week after week after week, and you hit a plateau, which is very common, a plateau in performance, talk about it all the time, then where do you go from there? There's nowhere to improve. And that high-end power, high-end energy systems, it's fast acting in the sense that you get a really good adaptation from it, but it's also plateaus really quickly. So after 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, you just start to really struggle and you don't see any improvement after that.
Right. You've been a coach at the RCA now for a couple of years, dealing with a lot of people between the ages of 45 and say 65 or 35 and 65. Is it common people coming in and that's pretty much all they're doing?
Yeah, I'd say 50% of people come in and they're like, I have a bunch ride 3 times a week. I'd like to still include it. That can be good sometimes, but it's about managing it with the athlete. So that relationship that I have with the athlete or any other coach has with an athlete, it's talking, okay, why do you want to do that bunch ride? Is it a social aspect? Is it because you're involved in the club and you need to be there every day? So talking about what benefit are you getting from that? Are you going hard all the time? Are you going easy sometimes? So looking at what's actually happening in those bunch rides, and they can be great sometimes. Like bunch rides are a really good way to get that social connection and connect with people in your community and go hard sometimes, but all the time can be quite fatiguing on the body.
Okay. So there's the fatigability aspect that can lead to a performance plateau, so that's the negative side.
Yeah.
What about the positive side? What's the benefits? Obviously there's a social aspect, but physically?
Physically, yeah. So that social aspect can be really important physically as well. So there's like the brain-body connection is really important. So when you have a positive interaction with people on a bike, that can be really important physically. You can probably push yourself, and there's some research about it. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but that physical connection and having connection with people is really important for you to push yourself harder. So often people, if they go out in a bunch ride, they can push themselves harder in that bunch ride or following a wheel or chasing that wheel up a hill in isolation can be a lot harder than what they would do on their own. So going out and doing, 10 1-minute efforts, for example, you might find it hard to push yourself so deep that you're getting a really good benefit from it. But in a bunch ride, it's like, I don't want to disappoint these people around me. I want to show that I'm super strong, so I'm going to hold the wheel no matter what. So that innate nature for cyclists to be competitive, that can be really effective for people to go and do bunch rides and push themselves to their limit once or twice a week.
Yeah.
But the important part is that you recover from that and you're not doing it all the time.
How would you therefore blend it into a plan? So let's just say the hypothetical, you've got somebody coming to you and they're doing 2 to 3 bunch rides a week and they want to maintain some, but you want to bed in some structured training around it. What's an ideal scenario?
So let's say, for example, you do 3 bunch rides a week. You're coming in and there's limited time for other things. And you're doing it for the reason of it's a social aspect. That's all you've done. So you really enjoy it and you don't want to give it up. So 2 times a week can be good. And it's talking about what type of training you're in as well. So if you're in a base training phase, you probably don't want to be going hard 3 times a week. Even 2 times a week, you don't want to be going hard. So it also depends what phase you're in. But if you're coming in, you usually do 3 a week. Let's talk about dropping 1 initially and see how you handle the load. See how that power zones looks throughout the week. See how you fatigue manage. and you want to swap it out for something that's going to be effective. So if you're getting too fatigued by doing 3 a week, then we might look at doing an easy ride on that third day where you would normally do a bunch ride. Or if you're a very on-off type of athlete, so you're very neurological, you're good at doing accelerations and getting back on the wheel, but you go up a climb, and this is very common, people who do bunch rides all the time, they're like, I really struggle on climbs, because you have to put out power for a constant time. Like 5 to 10 minute climb, for example, if you're in a bunch ride, you get that micro 10-second rest on the wheel, or you rest for 30 seconds sitting on for missing a turn, but going up a hill for 10 minutes, it's 300 watts the whole time. So that's something where you can replace that bunch ride and do some steady state work and really improve that physiology of riding at a steady state. And
yes.
that's very common.
Okay.
That's something we work with you, actually. We did that.
Yes, we've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's go down that rabbit hole for a while. So let's just say you replace one of your bunch rides with some steady state because it is lacking, and it was for me, you're right. Where would you start?
You would start at sub-threshold, so you don't want to be going over threshold because that's what you
get. Zone 4?
Zone 3, 4,
yep.
So in middle of zone 4 is your threshold. Under that, you want to stay under that. So anywhere from zone 3 to bottom end zone 4, depending on where you're starting. So if you haven't done any of it before, you would be starting in zone 3.
Okay.
Yes. Typically start around 3x10s or 3x8s, depending on how good you are physically.
And what's a 3x10 minutes, is it?
3x10 minutes.
Okay.
With a 5-minute recovery in there initially. So 2 to 1 rest rate, work to rest ratio is pretty typical.
And what's the recovery look like? For some people say, you just get off the bike and have a coffee?
Static recovery. Yeah. So you're riding at an easy pace. So you want your heart rate to come down. You're riding in zone 1, essentially. Okay. So you don't want to, riding in zone 2, you're still getting some sort of fatigue there, but you want to recover properly. So it's a feel thing as well. So if you're looking at a zone model, anywhere from 1, in zone 1, that's your recovery zone. So 5 minutes recovery in zone 1 and then get back into 10 minutes at zone 3.
Yeah.
And then you would progress that. So if you're just doing 3x10s every week for 6 weeks, it's like that gets very easy. So you want to progress the length, accumulate time in that zone. So go from 3x10s, 5-minute recovery, you might work up to 3x12s, then 3x15s, 3x20s eventually, which is quite a advanced level workout. But depending on what sort of power you're doing there, and you want to keep it steady state. So if you're doing it on a hill, it's the best way to do it because you can have that constant pressure, or on a dead flat road. Whereas undulating terrain can be quite hard for amateurs to keep that constant pressure. And you'll see it, and it's part of the training. The first interval you do in that, it'll be up and down, and your steady state may not be great. So that's part of the progression of the effort. So the first time you're doing any new interval session, it's always getting a feel for how that looks. So you progress it, and it's not just in progressing the length of the effort. You can change the intensity, the quality of the effort changes, the recovery. If you're doing 3x20s and it's like, I did that pretty easily, and you got 10-minute recovery at the 2 to 1 work to rest ratio, drop the recovery down to 5 minutes. You get 60 minutes out of a 70-minute workout, and like that rest, and you got 10 minutes recovery out of 70 minutes. So it's a pretty solid 60 minutes just below threshold. So
absolutely. So that's a great substitute. Going back to the bunch rides now, so let's just say we've kept the 2 bunch rides. Does this mean we can go smash ourselves on those 2 bunch rides every week?
Very dependent on how you're feeling. So that's the benefit of having a coach, is that you can talk through how that week's looking. So for example, it's as a coach and trying to develop that relationship with the athlete, you need to communicate with the athlete. You need to learn how you feel as well. So it's not, the coach can't always be there with them and talking about, my legs are tired today, or my heart rate's higher or lower today. Like, should I go hard or should I go easy? That's something that we learn, and at the RCA we try and teach that throughout the initial parts. So if you feel bad, then probably good idea to take it easy. But if you're feeling really good in that bunch ride, have a crack, see what you can do, push yourself. Not always the case, but generally if you're feeling good, then you're okay to have a crack. If you're feeling bad, then that's a pretty good sign. You should probably turn it down a bit, or do half of the bunch rides, or sit on for the first half and then see if you warm into it or something like that.
Yeah, okay. Just touching on like a progressive overload model where we want to have some recovery. should you maybe have weeks where you don't go do the bunch ride like every third or fourth week, or like what would you recommend something there?
If you're doing, say, we started with 3 bunch rides and when we got into a program, we're doing 2 bunch rides and 1 structured interval training the other day, then on an easier week, you might only do 1 bunch ride.
Okay.
So you have a rest day on that alternative day. And then that workout on the bunch ride, you'll feel great. Typically, you would feel really good at the end of that bunch ride. So you do it on a Saturday, for example. You've had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with 1 hard workout. So typically you would have 2.
Yeah.
So you're feeling pretty good by the end of the week. You're like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So generally in that recovery week, it's good to go hard because you can generally hit some PBs or really push yourself when you're feeling fresh. It's pretty unusual to feel fresh in a training block. So you can do testing in there, or you can push yourself in a bunch ride or do a club race or something like that. So in a rest week, it's still good to do hard in a recovery week, where your volume and your intensity is a bit less overall, because you feel good. You can go out and do some PBs or feel really good and go longer in the bunch ride than you would normally go. So that's a great idea to still do one.
Cool. Last question is then, doing the bunches in your on weeks, what rides would you recommend people do the day before and the day after, like a hard bunch ride?
Recovery or zone 2.
Recovery or zone 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Zone 2, like easy riding. So if it's a active recovery or a coffee ride, is a great one to do after a bunch ride. If it's on a weekend, typically people do bunch rides on a Saturday. So go and do your bunch ride plus some endurance or whatever it is, 2 to 3 hours. And then on Sunday, typically because people have time on a Sunday, you would do an easy zone 2 ride. So zone 2 ride, it's got to be zone 2. So we're not talking, I'm going 500 watts up a random hill every now and then. It's you want to do zone 2 because that's essentially recovery. If you look at a zone 2 ride properly, a proper zone 2 ride, it's recovery for particular parts of your body from that top end stuff. So it's really important to do that either side.
Okay, good. So in summary, bunch rides are good provided they're done in the right way.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look at the science, it's like, bunch rides are great, they push you, but if you do them too much, they're really hard. So it's finding that balance, what works best for you. If you really enjoy them, try and balance a bit, do a bit, go hard, but make sure you recover.